Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and Restless official. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. At Crimson Lights, Summer rambled that she understood if Chance was too busy, but she thought he could use a friend. She suggested that they grab some comfort food and have a laugh. She quickly added that if he needed to work, they could do it another time, and she requested a rain check. Summer started to walk away, but Chance told her that he wouldn't let her off the hook that easily. He declared that comfort food sounded great, and he was starving. They headed out together. On the coffeehouse patio, Nikki thanked Lauren for meeting her. Lauren ordered her to stop right there, and she demanded to know if Nikki had been drinking again. Nikki swore she hadn't had a drop of alcohol since the night before. She explained that she'd given in to temptation after a bad moment at the office. She insisted it was over, and she was completely sober. Lauren was glad to hear it, but she questioned what would happen 10 minutes from then. Nikki opened her purse to prove she had no hidden flask, and she mentioned that an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting that morning had helped her get back on track. Lauren believed Nikki, but she hoped Nikki understood why she was concerned. Nikki recognized that her behavior had been deplorable, and Lauren stressed that she was frightened for Nikki. Nikki was determined to beat it, noting that she had done it before and would do it again. Lauren clucked that words or meetings alone couldn't make it happen. Nikki pledged to do her damnedest to make sure nothing like that ever happened again. Lauren lamented that it had been heartbreaking to see Nikki in that condition, and it was sheer luck that no one else had witnessed it. Lauren commended Nikki for having incredible strength and pride in her sobriety, but Lauren hadn't seen any of it the night before. Nikki explained that it had been why she hadn't wanted Victor to see her that way, and she apologized for putting Lauren on the spot to make an excuse when he'd called. Lauren recounted that he'd known something had been wrong, and Nikki was grateful that Lauren had kept him from worrying that something terrible had happened. Lauren countered that something terrible had happened, and she remembered that she'd never been more worried than when Finn had been going through his addiction. Lauren bemoaned that it had been a living nightmare to feel utterly helpless, and Nikki swore the last thing she wanted was to upset Victor. Lauren insisted that she had nothing but compassion for Nikki, and she offered to support Nikki however she could. Lauren made Nikki promise to call her if Nikki was unable to get in touch with her sponsor, and she encouraged Nikki not to suffer alone or let her family suffer any more than they already had. Nikki hoped she never had to take Lauren up on her offer. Lauren had faith Nikki would get through it, but she reiterated that Nikki could always count on her. Nikki questioned how she could fail with all the support she had. Lauren pointed out that Seth had seemed very concerned, and she was sure he'd be available whenever Nikki needed. Nikki considered herself lucky to have found him, and she recalled that they'd traded success stories at meetings over the years. Nikki was grateful that he'd agreed to be her sponsor and that he'd made it easy for her to reach out once she'd realized she was in trouble. Lauren compared it to the mutual understanding Nikki had shared with Neil and Catherine. Nikki recognized that it was almost impossible to understand addiction unless one had experienced it personally, and while Lauren had gone through a lot with Finn, it hadn't been the same thing. Lauren mentioned that Finn was very close with his sponsor and that they'd even spent Christmas together. Nikki didn't think things were like that for her and Seth, but she was grateful he was there for her. Seth walked through the door. Seth said it was good to see both Nikki and Lauren. Nikki regretted not thanking him at the hotel suite because she'd been out of it. Seth was glad to see her looking better, and he pledged as her sponsor to help her get back to stable sobriety. Nikki noted that she hadn't seen Seth at the meeting that morning. He stifled a yawn and claimed he was under the weather. He added that he was on his way to a late meeting, and Nikki urged him to go home and rest afterward. Seth stressed that he always left his phone on in case she needed anything. After he headed into the coffeehouse, Nikki worriedly asked if Seth had seemed okay to Lauren. At Society, Summer prompted Chance to order all his favorites. He proclaimed that it would be everything on the menu, and she suggested they start with a drink to distract him from what was going on in his mind. He assured her that he didn't need a game plan devoted to cheering him up, but she figured that good food and wine would help pass the time until he was ready to process everything. Chance admitted that he'd been caught off guard because he'd thought things with Sharon had been going well, but part of him felt it was for the best. Summer empathized that it still hurt. Chance insisted that he wasn't bitter or angry, and he hoped he and Sharon could continue to be friends once the initial awkwardness passed. Summer praised his mature attitude, and she compared it to how she and Kyle tried to remain positive and civil for Harrison's sake. Chance imagined it was tougher for her because her relationship with Kyle had been deeper and longer, so there was a lot more pain to get past. Chance advised her that from his experience, it just took time to really figure out what the future looked like. Summer reminded him that they were there to cheer him up, and she recommended that they get some drinks going. Summer sensed that Chance and Sharon's breakup hadn't just happened that day, and she guessed that the couple had already ended things when Summer had last seen him. Chance explained that he had still been a little raw, and he hadn't been ready to bare his soul. Summer asked if he was ready then, but he replied that he'd rather talk about anything else. He turned the topic to the wardrobe tips she'd given him, and she bragged that her shopping spree had saved his career. She teased that it meant he had to trust her judgment about all things going forward, and he joked that he clearly had no choice. As Summer and Chance exited the restaurant, she remarked that the clothes were nice, but it was the man inside that made all the difference. He said he had to get going, since he couldn't show up to work ragged from hanging out too late. She didn't want to be responsible if he got fired his first week on the job, and she murmured that the evening had been nice. He suggested they do it again soon. At Daniel's apartment, Daniel apologized to Danny for Lucy blasting her music. Danny mentioned that he'd already asked her to send him her playlist, and he expressed shock that he wasn't on it. Daniel thanked Danny for humoring her by asking for her list, but Danny admitted that he'd really gotten into some of it. Danny added that he never knew where he'd find motivation to stay on the cutting edge. Danny's phone chimed with multiple text messages, and Daniel guessed from his father's smile that they were from Christine. Danny read a message from Phyllis, asking if he had a minute to talk. Meanwhile, Phyllis paced in her hotel room and willed Danny to get back to her. Phyllis convinced herself that Christine was with him right then, taking shots at Phyllis to make herself feel better. "Oh, no, Christine. That is not going to work. I refuse to let the bug come between me and Danny ever again," Phyllis pledged. Phyllis searched her dresser drawers and pulled out some sexy lingerie. She gazed into a mirror and held a bra up next to her body. She mused that Danny had given her no choice, but she didn't mind one bit. Phyllis changed into the skimpy lingerie and smiled as she put on nothing but a trench coat over it. Back at Daniel's place, Lucy entered the room and announced that she was hungry. Danny offered to whip her up something, but Lucy cited a specific craving for grilled cheese the way her mom made it. Daniel protested that Lucy didn't have to go all the way over to her mother's place for a sandwich, but Lucy clarified that Heather was on her way there. Lucy stepped into the kitchen to make sure they had everything they needed. Danny observed that things had escalated fast, and Daniel figured that it would make Lucy happy.